so what do you have when you move beyond cynicism? And what you have when you move beyond cynicism is wisdom. And that's not naive, it's courageous. And one of the things that religious people have done relatively badly, especially in recent years, is they've failed to delineate the relationship between faith and courage. People like Dawkins and the New Atheists, they point to faith and they describe it as something like belief in foolish superstitions. But that isn't really what faith in the deepest sense means. It means that you are willing to act out the proposition that you can ride the wave no matter how big it becomes. How does your cynicism let you off the hook? Right? How does your cynicism justify your desire to avoid necessary responsibility and to pursue your own short-term hedonic gains? It's like, why aren't you cynical about your own doubt? And that's another place where wisdom begins. It's like that. So that's two, right? Cynicism beats naivety, but it's not the ultimate destination. And you should be cynical enough to question the moral validity of your own resentment and your own, what would you say, your own turning away from the world.
The way that I see it, given that we don't know the future, given that much of our motivations are invisible to us, we're not a crystal pond that we can see into, you have to have some form of delusion about what's going to happen in the future. You're trying your best to see the way that it's going to be, but given that the glass could be half empty or half full, why not have a delusion that's going to be useful to you, one of hope, even in the face and the understanding that things might be difficult and that there's going to be obstacles?
There was a line of social psychology that pursued that argument for quite a while, that made the argument that people had to have positive illusions about the future, and that was the fundamental way that people staved off despair and bolstered their self-esteem. But I don't think we need to separate out the distinction between fantasy and delusion. You have to provisionally map the future. That's what a plan is.
Positive
That's
goal.
What a strategy is.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't make it a delusion. Like, it becomes a delusion when the map bears no relationship to the underlying territory. So if you have a strategy for the future, maybe let's say that your strategy for the future, just for the sake of argument, is that you have 5 million YouTube subscribers in 3 years. Well, you have no evidence of the strict sort that that's how it's going to be, because anything could happen between now and 3 years from now, let's say. But there's no reason to call that a delusion. It's one hypothetically possible path of potential. It's a delusion when you're ignoring elements of your own experience that would inform your fantasy more effectively. You're ignoring them so that you can live in a positive representation of the future without having to pay the appropriate price for it.
One of my favorite ideas I learned over the last couple of years is the inner citadel from Isaiah Berlin. Do you know this? Mm-hmm. So Isaiah Berlin says, when the natural road toward human fulfillment is blocked, human beings retreat into themselves, become involved in themselves, and try to create inwardly that world which some evil fate has denied them externally.
That's a delusion often.
If you cannot obtain from the world that which you really desire, you must teach yourself not to want it. If you cannot get what you want, you must teach yourself to want what you can get. Mm-hmm. This is a very frequent form of spiritual retreat in depth into a kind of inner citadel in which you lock yourself up against all of the fearful ills of the world. There was a recent interview with Elon Musk where he said something, "My mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me.
Right.
They may think they would want to be me, but they don't. They don't know. They don't understand." Mm-hmm. What do you think of that? Elon's someone that people probably look up to and admire and aspire to be.
One of the downsides to high-level genius is you might describe it as hypomania. So here's a simple test that people can do. So this is a test of something called verbal fluency, and verbal fluency is associated with creativity. And so here's a simple verbal fluency test. Write down as many 4-letter words as you can in 3 minutes that begin with T. Okay, that's pretty constrained, 4 letters and T. Or write down as many words as you can in 3 minutes that begin with S. That's less constrained. All right, so there's quite a powerful correlation between the sheer number of words that you produce and your lifetime creative achievement, right? Especially in the artistic and verbal domains. And when that gets completely out of control, you have manic. You have someone who's manic. And there's nothing fun about manic. That's where the word maniac comes from. And someone who's manic has 1,000 different plans, each of which are one sentence long, that they're hyper enthusiastic about. They'll spend every cent of their money pursuing them, and things just go immediately to hell. And so that's the outer limit of pathology on the creative front. And someone like Musk, who's clearly a genius, that's what he's contending with in his internal landscape. Now, I'm not saying that he's manic, because I see no signs of that, but someone that creative is on that edge. Or you see someone like Ben Shapiro. I mean, it's very interesting to talk to Ben, because, and Russell Brand is the same way. Shapiro speaks, I think, more rapidly than anyone I ever met. But if you're with him, you see very clearly that he's probably thinking 5 times that fast. And that's a lot. And when I was writing Maps of Meaning, which was my first book, I had a very difficult time shutting off my mind. I was obsessed with that book. And so I was writing about 3 hours a day. And then I was thinking about the material like for 12 hours. And the thoughts came as way faster than thinking. They probably came about as fast as I can read. I can read about 1,200 words a minute if the material isn't overwhelmingly dense. And so it was just nonstop thought for like 16 hours a day. That's part of the reason I started lifting weights, because if I was lifting heavy enough weights,
can't be thinking at 1,200 words a minute while I've got 100 pounds on my back.
It was enough to. It was enough to shut it down.
What about all of the baggage? What's the price? What's the entry price?
He also appears to me to be hyper conscientious, and I know people who've worked with him. Like, Musk isn't just a creative genius. He's also an extremely conscientious engineer, and really conscientious engineers, they have very interesting minds. I like talking to engineers because my brother-in-law is a great engineer. And when he understands something, Jim, when he understands something, he understands how to build it out of atoms, right? Like, he understands it at every single level. It's in your head and in the world at the same time. It's truly the case that your sanity is the concordance between you as an individual and the world. That's the sanity. It's not the proper structuring of your psyche, or your brain for that matter, inside your skull. You're distributed out into the world. And you should be. And you want to be. That's where the adventure is. You want to be solipsistic? The solipsistic porn masturbator. If we have a problem, we're going to deal with it right now. And we're going to deal with it right to the bottom. And that's very unpleasant. But if you do it, sometimes you only have to do it once and the problem goes away. And then you don't have that bloody problem every day for the rest of your life. And sometimes it takes, 20 times before it's fixed, before you've got to the bottom of things. And that can be very unpleasant. Douglas is very, very good at not letting people off the hook. The standards you judge other people by will be the standards that you yourself are judged by. And the reason for that is, well, how are you going to judge everyone else and not apply the same standards to yourself? Like, that's not going to happen, because you become what you practice, and you'll turn the hostile eye that you turn on others, you will absolutely turn on yourself. There's no way around that. And so Douglas plays a dangerous game because he's very combative, but he's also extremely careful. He's very careful with his words.
If you manage to get sort of 2 or 3 real zingers, you won. Regardless of the content, if you do 2 or 3 real zinger, whole crowd laughs, guess what? You got.
Yeah, well, the great public intellectuals have a vicious sense of humor, right? And I mean, I also think that's why so many of the successful podcasters have been comedians. Well, at the ARC conference, I think Konstantin Kissin's speech was the overwhelming hit of the convention. I think it's got 600,000 views as of today, 650 on the ARC side, and about 600 on his own channel. Konstantin did a beautiful job of merging intellectual content with wit.
Well, the interesting thing about my live tour that I'm about to start doing, a bunch of my comedian friends have said to me, dude, I am so jealous of the tour that you get to do, because no one's expecting you to be funny. If you manage to be funny 4 times in 90 minutes, you've killed. If I'm not funny once every 7 seconds, I'm a shit comedian.
Right.
So the bar is set. And obviously coming in with Konstantin's background of comedy means that he is able to be by far far and away way funnier than most public speakers. But doesn't get held necessarily to the same standards that he's not expecting to be one-liners all the time. And his first thought to himself was, wouldn't it be great if we came back here next year? It would be so great if we could come back here next year. So literally during the supposed enjoyment of the destination, he was already thinking about the journey. And, it's not the journey, it's not the destination, it's the journey is kind of trite, but it puts a new perspective on it. There is no destination. Each destination is simply the beginning of the next journey. And I haven't not been able to see it. I see it everywhere. I see it everywhere in my own life.
Well, there's technically 2 different forms of reward.